snap, it's expecting the project to be XML whereas in PYB, it has its own format. And in this Safari, it exported it not the right way, it was XML. So they had to export yeah.
Yeah, it's still straight down the street from Grandma's house, and they put over the
Exported as a HTML. Archive files, maybe something weird, homework fine. But some of them don't have that. And, we did these, they could submit music requests, we would allow them to play music, that they were really in class. So people talk and stuff, music, and it's just, well, then we review some of that stuff, create a new costume, import the costumes, so, introducing that.
Yeah, should we move to this table?
We could do that, yeah, that works.
There's something that happens that I can't handle. If you have this stuff, like I say, if you're going to BYOB and you have your stuff, PowerPoint or whatever on your computer, you have to, but yeah. So, we ended up going to this, although we didn't use it.
It's like a small number of people.
Stage, the stage is similar, it's bright, there's no block. A couple of weeks in, yeah. Yeah.
I gotta sit next to you. Do it. Because I got stuff to do. Oh, there you go. It's like a scary chain of.
Oh, yeah.
What's up?
I was saying this like double chain of.
Oh yeah.
I get in big trouble for that at work.
The last conference I went to in Denver for Apache Con was kind of like this, because they have these large banquet-sized rooms and some smaller classrooms. But like the plugs are of course on the wall. Then you have a bunch of people trying to keep their laptops on, so you have huge chains of power outlet strips. It is kind of fire hazardous, but they don't care. They just want to get their machine online.
We're the only. Oh yeah, this is only.
There's one other AP team in Newport Beach, just like couldn't be further situation-wise.
San Diego, but
well,
yeah.
that's true. Yeah, at least among what we're working with. But they're the ones that are trying to call in, and I don't know, it's been a terrible broadcast.
They have their own representative down there, or are you running that?
No, I do the whole state, which is kind of fun.
The whole state.
Yeah, which is why I like. Who that person is. Which is why I'm based in the Bay Area, so every time I come down here, it's like a little bit uncertain with like locations and everything. So that's been fun. But yeah, cool. So essentially, what I wanted to go over was the project, the first project, and then the AP tests, so that you can have some idea of like what kids will have to do going after that. And then you will eventually do the second project, but I think you've already done it, it sounds like. You'll find that it's like very, very large. And there's some, it's kind of like beyond, the one that we provided is kind of like beyond what kids need to do to master the AP, but it's like it's probably the hardest version of that project that any TEALS class has ever given. And so just to see like what kids can possibly do. But there's definitely room to like eliminate some checkpoints, and there's also an alternative project that like one class last year was just like, we're not doing this spreadsheet, we're making this other project, and it's like kind of graphical and like different, but it gets at the same concept, so like you could decide that that's like the way to go.
Does it involve like having to teach them swing and DBT?
Graphical, it's like ASCII art, so similar. They like there's like different characters
Mhm.
in this game, and you can create them and manipulate them with commands, and then like print the world.
Oh, I see.
And
Okay.
it's like
Text
similar,
adventure-ish.
right?
Okay.
So it's like pretty similar to the Excel thing, actually, except that it's not Excel. It's like a cool world.
ZZT.
Okay. So that's an option also when you get to that. But Frac Calc, I think, is reasonable enough that like everyone should be able to do it. So we'll focus on that. So I don't know how much of this I want to actually talk through. This is helpful, I think. So this is like a visualization of the class, just to see like what they know at each point. So at the point when, at least according to the syllabus, Frac Calc is introduced, they don't know arrays yet, but they know some other stuff. And I think that's probably the hardest part, is like doing this project without arrays and without objects. And so a lot of schools have pushed arrays up, or like pushed the project back to cover arrays, which I think is okay. But I wouldn't I wouldn't wait for objects to do it, because I think like the experience of doing it without knowing objects is actually useful.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they do learn objects, they'll be like, oh, like that would have been so much easier, as opposed to just being like, why objects are complicated? Like, why are we making everything harder?
Right.
Yeah, so that's generally where they are, and then they start learning objects and all that stuff in order to do text Excel. And then third quarter, there used to be this case study called Grid World that was required. It was not only required in the course, but there was explicit AP questions that pertained to it.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to it referenced like specific classes and methods from that assignment.
Mm-hmm.
They threw that out this year, so for the first time, it's not
The
required.
AP program?
Yeah, like the College Board
Okay.
AP exam no longer has a question on Grid World.
Okay.
It's no longer required in the curriculum. You could still do it. It's not a bad project.
What are they replacing it with?
They have made a requirement that students must spend at least 20 hours on lab work during the year, which would probably happen anyway.
Right.
And they've suggested 3 labs that you could use to fill that time. But the 3 labs that they've suggested will not explicitly be tested on the exam. So there's no you don't have to use them. They're kind of good though, so you could use them. And there's some talk. So the 3 labs essentially have to do with arrays and then objects.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are thinking that the free response question that used to be on Grid World will most definitely have to do with either arrays or objects.
Right.
But it's all speculation, because this is the first year of that.
Right.
So just something to be aware of.
That's good.
It could work well
change it.
though.
The first year.
The first year I taught AP Bio was the first year for the exam, and it was graded very favorably.
Uh-huh.
So that could be true again.
Yeah. Well, we want them to learn and not depend on the curve.
Yeah.
That's okay.
But yeah, so I think Grid World is still a good project, but at least that question I think was garbage. You had to specifically understand the case study, and that's kind of bad.
Not
So
fair.
the third quarter you cover some topics, and then the fourth quarter used to be case study and then test review. Now it could be those labs, or maybe other types of review or bigger activities. There's more freedom there.
Okay.
And then exam review. So that's generally what the year looks like.
I have one question about, I don't see here on the list, exceptions. Where would we expect to cover that in Q1? Because I used a little bit of that for the project.
Interesting. I definitely would cover it before the second project.
Okay.
I don't know if you need to cover it before the first one. I would see where your kids are at, and if you think they will understand it, or if it'll be confusing.
Well, specifically for the conversion of a string to a number, you have to be able to the function has to throw more than no such number, or number format exception, or catch it. So the try catch finally having construct, I feel like it has to be
right. Well, one thing you could also just give it to them.
Yeah.
And then not really get into the mechanics of it. I think it will be confusing.
Yeah.
So that could be something you just give to them and then introduce later. Or if you think they'll get it, you could introduce it there.
Okay.
But before the second project, I definitely would,
For sure.
because then it'll get crazy. Same thing with debugging. At some point, you probably want to show them some aspects of using a debugger, setting breakpoints.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if the first project is probably...
Line, man.
Yeah, which I was going to say. I mean, definitely for the first project, I don't think that's the place for it. So that's the other thing that's not explicitly on the exam, but fits in somewhere. So tips and tricks. yeah, I guess this is like generally what the topics are, with an additional focus on like instilling habits. Like kids are going to come in and just be like, I don't know how to write code. Um, so like if you have any style related things, this is probably like you'd want to emphasize them early. Or like the idea of like testing things or like print line and like how to use that. This is like all stuff that they're just like not going to do intuitively. Naming variables is something they're not going to do intuitively. So that's like additional things that you probably want to spend time on.
And teach them how to search for all the Java resources and documentation. I don't use Java normally, so I think that a lot.
Yeah, so that's good then.
As long as it's not confusing, because like if you bust out the API docs and you see like 30 different inherited functions, like
Right.
what is this? So yeah, definitely documentation.
Yeah, that's a good one. And commenting also is one that they probably won't think to do.
And now is a really good time to get them into it, because I know, at least in my work, like when it comes to writing code, like if I don't have to comment, I'm not going to. So good luck, next person reading my code.
I've only done that one time.
Yeah.
So
All the courses that I took in college, they were really strict about over commenting. Like you really, because the point is not just to get them to like making the code manageable for someone else later, but like as a person who's grading the project, if you need to sit down and figure out what it is they're doing, but if you have no idea what it is they're doing, having the comments helps. So at least as far as telling them that like if your project is not working right, but you actually have indicated here what it should be doing, maybe you'll get some partial credit out of it. But bribery now will maybe help their style later.
yeah, I mean, yeah, you could just make it a part of their grade on like anything they turn in, even like free points almost if they do it. So yeah, that's I think generally like some of the unwritten things that like should still be part of the class. Cool. Yeah. Right. So then, I mean, at the end of this, essentially, they do the project. And so I think the most important things to decide. Did you guys all do it?
Most of it.
Okay. At least as long as you're like generally familiar with the idea, otherwise this won't be as productive. But I think like the most important things are to predict like where they're gonna get stuck, and then decide like which of those things do you want to upfront like alert them to, and like which of those things do you think are actually good learning experiences. And so yeah, that I think is essentially like what we should discuss right now. It's just like as you were doing it, what things were you like they tripped up here, but this is what they're learning, as opposed to like I need to.
So under, at least for me, under the conditions that we can't use classes and we can't use arrays, this project for me boiled down to a whole lot of string manipulation. So I don't know if that's kind of the way everyone else did it, but I mean it's making sure that they are
parsing a bunch of annoying different cases.
Yeah, and that too. Yeah, so like I mean, there's like 8 different test cases that I came up with. How you could potentially provide something and not be able to do it. But then the extra credit kind of also made that a little more complicated, in that you have to actually think ahead as to how you're going to apply the operators, and then what happens if you get something evaluated that's not actually a number? How do you propagate that up? That kind of thing. But yeah, with no arrays in classes, man, that sucks. It's hard.
Yeah, you could, like I said, you could introduce arrays. I don't think that's a bad idea. But no classes, yeah. They should experience the drudgery.
I think for this, there's gonna have to be definitely a lot of direction and getting them from A to B to C, because I know how to manipulate
all
the
those string functions, split, and like contains, and
well, you can even use split because it returns an array. So right. So,
So the suggestion was to use like to use tokenizer, which is like it's a function that like
totally cheated.
that stores the whole thing in an object, but you don't quite realize it, and then you can like reference next.
Yeah.
Like on a delimiter.
Yeah.
I would recommend you introduce arrays.
Yeah, so maybe that's something you guys would want to decide sooner rather than later. Is like, okay, where you could introduce arrays, and that just is going to change the dates for like when.
Let's see. really identifying the test cases is kind of critical, because when you tell the student that they need to make their project work for, a number underscore, a number slash another number, how many different combinations there are that you can make of that input, that, some of them are supposed to be valid and some of them are not supposed to be, right? That, I think, is going to be a major trick for students, because even though they'll probably come up with a good portion of them, because we say, you can have the whole number specified, or you may not have the whole number specified, in which case there isn't an underscore, or you can have any number, but mathematically you can't have a denominator being 0. They will think of most of them, but they were not going to think of the extra combination of cases, like what happens if I put in a decimal? Should that be considered a number? What happens if I put in hello instead of an actual number? That kind of. So I think leading up to the project, there's got to be some kind of examples, or with much shorter programs where you can deal with handling input, so that they have the mechanism to think ahead and apply it to this kind of thing.
They need to be very good at all that manipulation before they get to this project.
Yeah, how to find where the slash is, how to find where the underscore is, what happens when it's not there, what does that mean? What if you have 2 slashes in there, or something like that?
Right.
So, I think, do we want to provide them with sample test inputs as some of the exceptions? Because if we don't expect them to come up with all of them, should we provide the entire test suite for them with the expected results?
We should have some. I think we should have some that they can test their thing against, just to have an idea that they're doing it right.
Yeah.
And then we should have a secret one.
Yeah.
That
extra credit, or as part of
we
the actual project.
used to run against to test the validity of their thing that we maybe not get with them.
Yeah. I'm okay with that. But then do you tell the students that, or make it clear to the students that the test suite that you provide to them is not completely inclusive of all the things that we might do other things, and so it's up to them to.
Shocked when it's not. You didn't let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless the test suite that you provide to them is all inclusive of every case.
Mm-hmm. Then they're just going to test
they're just
for
they're
this.
just gonna target what it is.
But I guess.
The greatest common denominator thing. They might. I just pulled it off of what.
I was gonna say, I think honestly, I think that's something that you can give them. It's like that is not the purpose of this project.
Yeah.
It's a good trick though to know. I mean, it's something, especially when you take college math, that is very useful.
And the version I pulled was recursive. So
See, yeah, but you can do it. You can do that. It's Archimedes.
I think it's Euclidean.
Euclideans. Yeah. You do 2 ways. I mean, you could do it with the recursive method, or you could just sit there and just iterate every single combination of denominators, or you could just skip all that crap like I did and just multiply them, and then just and then do this reduction later. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that's definitely something that we shouldn't expect them to know ahead of time, because number theory in high school, no way.
Yeah.
But then, will they be able to, if you give it to them in advance with some examples of how it works, do you want to draw that line as to, you should remember this because we will help, you will be useful for the project later, or we'll tell you this and then kind of surprise them with an instance later where it's useful, like the project?
No, practice and remember.
You practice and remember?
Remember. Don't think, oh, I'm just going to do it this day and I can forget about it. It's never going to come back again.
Yeah.
And then sit there and stare at us like we ruined their life because they didn't know.
Yeah, definitely introducing that as earlier is better, but I think we should definitely, since the approach is going to be naive in pretty much every respect, there's got to be some latitude for the students to come up with, solutions that work but are grossly ineffective, because they're still, this is the first time it's being introduced to them. So, but direction-wise, do you focus on having one specific solution, or like if they come up with stuff that does involve like arrays and objects later, do you discourage that by saying no, we're not using those kind of things, but if you know them, go ahead and use them? I don't know.
I would say like not allow objects, because
Okay.
I think that takes away from like the purpose of this.
Okay.
But array, I mean, arrays I feel like is the alternative is like not a useful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Um,
You
and
never
so-
do it there.
Right, like there's no like learning necessarily from like parsing strings a different way.
Yeah.
But there might be learning from like having to deal with other ways of storing a fraction and stuff without objects.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's generally where I would go. And one thing that a couple teams have done is like later when kids learn objects, as an intermediate assignment, have them like rewrite
Yeah.
frac calc with objects and just see like how much easier it is.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing.
I end up storing all my fractions as arrays of 2 elements. Just two like fake objects.
No, I just created new strings and just stored all
Oh,
stuff in there. Yeah. It's funny though. You telling me you can't use an array, but you're using strings just for your character.
Yeah.
Whatever. That's okay. I don't know what else was there. Like math. The math. You should expect that they'd be able to do this by now. If they are juniors in high school or seniors in high school, they can
If
add.
they're in AP, they should be able to do it.
Yeah.
The-
Add simple fractions. Right?
One of the things that I think is helpful, well, there's two things about the math that are confusing. So one is the negative numbers,
Mhm.
and like they're probably going to encounter issues with the negative numbers.
Mhm.
And the other thing that someone told me was like, it's like you should be able to do it, but then implementing the steps of it is tricky. Like they're like, yeah, I'm multiplying these fractions or whatever, and I know I'm doing it intuitively, but like I'm not sure what the steps are that I'm going through.
Mhm.
So a good suggestion that I've heard is to, after they create these test cases, to
Mhm.
actually go through and do them all by hand.
Right.
Anyway, they have to get the answer. But as they're doing it, kind of like write out the steps or like think through specifically, like I did this and then I did this and then I did this and that's like how I'm gonna.
Right.
And then like with the negative number, like, you know, what are you doing differently? Like what are the cases?
Yeah.
I think that will trip people up.
And then, like, can you have a negative whole number and then a negative denominator or a negative numerator, combine those two, or just one negative in the number, and then, like, how do you do combining of a whole number plus a improper fraction, or, yeah, improper fraction as one unit? Is it still legit as an actual number? Still must develop. I think the dealing with errors was the big thing too. 'Cause there was not really any direction in the project about what you do when you come across an error. So it was really up to the student to figure out what they wanted to do with it. So like if you come across two numbers that are you're dividing by 0, but then you still have like additional terms to deal with, they have to realize that if you're adding a string that says there's an error and plus a number, that means the result should be the error and not any actual additional processing. So in addition to, the point is that in addition to adding numbers, they have to be able to realize what they need to do when there is not a number. And it's not just like a random string.
Right. And one thing you can do is limit the scope of the inputs some amount. Like if it's like too crazy, you could say things like you'll never get a scenario where this happens, or you'll never get a scenario where that happens. Because otherwise it's a little bit beyond the scope of what they need to be able to do. Is like maybe like specify that you need to be able to handle these cases.
Yeah.
And other than that, like you won't get anything that's outrageous.
So that goes back to the robust test suite that we'll provide to them. Or at least
Right.
a good portion of it, and then leave them up to their own to figure out the rest.
That covers most of the major things, unless there are other things that you guys are still wondering about.
I'm curious how we're going to put together like these lesson plans and what like we're briefing each session, and what's the plan for getting that together. I saw that you might have showing me like a bunch of resources and
Oh,
stuff.
and the curriculum
Yeah, that's
materials section.
that one. It's way better for AP than Intro, also because it's just so much more standardized. So yeah, in the curriculum repository, which is on the dashboard, there's There's a lot of stuff. There are like unit tests, quizzes per chapter, noting that the chapter pertains to the other textbook.
Yeah.
But it's just on topics. So like, the questions still apply. You might just have to like shuffle some around. And then there are a lot of activities, but alternatively, like for some, so essentially like the part that you have to do is sort of break these objectives down to like what days are we covering things, and like there's a lot of pacing in here. So there's even like week by week. It's like these are the topics that you should cover every week. So now it's like splitting it across 3 days, which is, reasonable. And then there are like sample assignments here. The other cool thing that you can use, and I'll just show it to you because I think it's cool, is this thing called Practice It. And so
I've seen that.
it's based on the other textbook, but it doesn't matter. And so this is the website, but I think it's also posted on the summer training thing. And so you initially have to create an account, which is like,
right out of the room,
yeah, I don't think they even support it anymore, but it's still pretty cool. So you initially have to create an account, which is like you associate yourself with like some random school. Nobody checks this anymore. And then you say you want to practice, and they have like all the textbook chapters, and actually it's questions out of the textbook that are put online. And so let's say you pick one, and I'm sure I won't get these right, but yeah, so it's a question, and it'll say like what output is produced by the following program, and let's say you say like 7. And it'll tell you, like, in this case it only has like there's only one right answer, but sometimes it'll ask you to write code, and it'll generate a bunch of test cases, and then it'll tell you which ones you passed and which ones you failed. So it's like pretty good for kids to just go through, and you can just say like do these ones, and like they can kind of self-evaluate like and debug and get pretty far without you having to intervene. And so there could be days when literally this is what you do. Like you're like, great, we're gonna introduce a new topic, I'm going to do some examples, and now you're working on these 3 or 4 like practice it questions. And the one weird thing is that there's no way to like submit this to you. So like
they copy and paste it, and
you can screenshot, and so that's like one way. So you have to like find a workaround for that. If it's in class, you could just be like raise your hand and show me, or you could say like screenshot and submit it somewhere. But this is like a lot of practice problems that you don't have to create, that already exist. So that's one good resource in addition to like the stuff that's already up there. So a lot of what you have to do is more like just group things into different days and then figure out that introduction scaffolding part about like how you're going to explain the concepts that they need. But hopefully you won't have to create too many activities, because I think that's the most time-consuming thing.
So we should probably get together at some point.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Make this happen.
Before
Yeah.
Okay, there's only 2 more weeks. I just wing it, right?
I mean, we don't have to get the whole. You can, get a couple.
Yeah,
in the bank,
Yeah.
and then like.
I wouldn't plan too far in advance anyway, because
Yeah.
like by then you'll get off
Yeah,
track
something
somewhere,
will change.
and you'll be like, oh, we need to spend more time on this topic.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at least like Unit 1, you can probably map out, and that gives you like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
then we're just gonna have to meet up every now and then, ahead of
Yep.
time.
Yeah.
We're gonna be bonding, you guys.
So yeah, let's we'll work through email, figure out like the past schedule.
Definitely.
Yeah, and this even gives, oh, never mind. Well, actually, yeah, gives like suggested practice it questions for every unit, which you can use. Your textbook is different, so you might want to check and just see if there are textbook questions that you can assign that are relevant.
So for every class, are all 4 of us going to be present?
That's
Yeah,
up
we
to
have
you.
to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, you guys don't meet every day of the week, so that gives more flexibility. As in, like, it would be crazy to require everyone to come 5 days a week.
Yeah.
But your class meets 3 days a week, so you can figure out how you want to. Like, that's kind of something that you have to discuss.
Mix and match in 2 at a time.
I think 2 at a time probably makes sense. 30 kids. Well, we have a teacher helping us too, right?
We
See,
have a teacher in learning.
that's the thing. Okay, so
We have a teacher who's
Oh,
like
okay.
a student.
I see.
Yep.
I brought this up before.
Yeah, I
I
brought
brought it
it
up while
there.
Kathy was standing there. And like, the only expectation I have of Dr. Umadi is that he'll take attendance, maybe tell them to shut up if they're out of line, and that's it. Like the rest is gonna be us.
I'm pretty sure he can handle that because they're supposed to be 10th graders. A good portion of them will probably already know him.
Mm-hmm.
And that school is pretty respectful, though. People
Yeah.
think that they're bad. Like, they're not that bad.
No, I'm not worried about that.
They're
like,
like, they'll sit there.
Yeah.
You'll have maybe like 3 who want to just see if they can test you, and then once they find out that they can't, they're just like, all right, fine.
I mean, these should be like some of the best students at the school and the most motivated, right?
They should be, yes. We hope so.
not always. but there should be.
There's always surprises.
But so the schedule that we'll have is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Monday, Wednesday,
And
Friday.
Monday is short.
And the
Right.
other days are how long? 90 minutes?
90-ish
I
minutes.
think
Yeah.
so.
So if we're spending a quarter of that time on lecture, a quarter to a third, assuming it's like up to half an hour, right,
Mhm.
per day doing lecture. What the Monday just seems not entirely useful. I mean, one of us will have to be there on Monday, right? Or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of us will have to be there. But what will they do in 60 minutes? Just will we talk about it, or just use it as an extended lab, or?
I think it's probably an extended lab because Mondays are always like the crappy days.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be there in the morning. You're
And then-
going to have to take 15 minutes to get them to sit down and quiet.
Right.
Versus
This-
the
this
other
is
days.
first period. Right?
Yeah, that's the thing too. It's a first period,
Oh.
so there's additional clerical stuff that they have to do, right? There's no like homeroom period. The first.
No,
first period.
homeroom isn't first period. They have a homeroom thing, but it's I think it's like second period.
Okay.
And I'm not sure. I don't think it's every day.
Yeah.
I think it's one day out of the week.
So it's good. First period.
I don't know. I think you have to get a gauge of how the student's mental state is.
At 8
Yeah.
You guys will
in the
just have to be
morning.
really exciting.
Yeah.
That's part of the job.
Exciting.
That's what, yeah, your next online module is on
I'm just thinking
engagement.
about engagement. Yeah.
Maybe Mondays you tell some random story about something that.
I don't know. That's a whole year long. I don't have that many stories.
You don't have that many
I
stories.
got like maybe one day worth of stories.
Something engaging,
Well,
something new in technology.
I mean, they're not going to be so, like, it's not going to be terrible. Like, they obviously have to function first period.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like a thing that they do.
Well, my first periods when I was in high school, you just kind of get to class and kind of head on desk, and that was pretty much it. But
I copied the homework that I was due in second
Oh.
period.
and there will be a lot of that too. And I like the technology access. Like, are they going to actually spend all their time on their laptops? Are they getting for this class, or is it the tablets? I don't understand that either.
I believe it's,
No, I'm not sure if they're getting the tablets. 'Cause
I think
know
it's laptops.
Intro's getting.
yeah, last I checked
Okay.
it was laptops. They have a cart.
But are they going to just sit there and browse Facebook all
They can't.
period?
It's locked down.
Oh, is it locked down pretty
Yeah,
good?
school's locked down. It was
Okay.
only unlocked during the summer. I had some kids who got on YouTube.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's all locked. They can't get into anything.
And they can't access YouTube either, so we'll have to get the videos and stuff. that
Right,
one
so
had
if you
time.
want them to access
Yeah,
interesting,
yeah.
actually, you should check. I wonder if they can even access like these kinds of practice it and stuff. Like it's
Yeah.
worth checking all that stuff ahead of time,
Yeah. Probably.
in case it's like really locked down.
Yeah.
But yeah, these are all things that you should discuss at your team meeting.
Yes.
But yeah, having a day that's like primarily practice, I don't think is totally crazy. Like anyway, because there's a lot of coding and like there's a lot of
Then Monday would probably be practice day.
yeah. Like I don't think that would be the worst.
When it comes down to it, you're gonna have like 45 minutes
Yeah.
of they could just practice thing.
So yeah, I mean that's not so terrible anyway. So I want to look a little bit at like practice and assessments, which we started to talk about, and then at the AAP exam because I think that'll be helpful. So okay, we talked about practice it, and so that's one helpful resource. Homework we kind of already talked about, but essentially. Like you want homework to be like practice on concepts, but not something that they can't, like not something so hard that they need tons of support. Like if you give daily homework and it's really hard, kids will be like, this is like I'm not doing this.
Right.
So more of like review, like straightforward, like book kind of questions, I think is probably a good use for homework.
And there's going to be a practical limit, right? Because if they don't have access to a laptop or something that they can do this on at home, then they're not going to be able to complete
Right. Now, granted, I think there's access to computers outside of school, but not necessarily at their home.
Okay.
Like they can access them in school. But yeah, even so, like there are a lot on the AP exam. They have to write a lot of code by hand, and they have to.
Right.
It's all paper and pencil, so like
Right.
it's a good opportunity to be like do all these exercises by hand, and
Yeah.
like that is, it's still productive. And so I think this thing suggests like weekly homework that's due like on the week. And so you could do it that way, like college problem set style, or maybe like more rigid. I don't know. That would depend on like how well these kids can budget their time.
Maybe that Monday then could be go over last week's homework.
Oh, that would be great. And then you can go over questions that people
Yeah.
are definitely going to have. And that's plenty of time to just sit there and go over
Oh yeah,
homework.
that's a really good idea. And then like have a couple of extra practice problems on hand when you finish early. That's not a bad idea. Cool, I like it. So these are various just like homework.
Have one day where they can work on it in class.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, these are just various homework guidelines around like how to use it. Yeah, give some time to work on it in class, go over it the day it's due. You can use like peer grading on that. And yeah, the takeaway here is that like you don't want it to be so tied to their grade as much as like learning. So like you might grade more for completion than correctness. And it's more just for you to be like, where are they at? And not so much like you got it wrong, like your grade is terrible. And so that's like sort of the approach, as opposed to like a quiz or a test, which is like I'm trying to actually see whether you understand. I mean, not whether you understand, but whether it's like correct. I don't know if you guys have mandatory grade scales, and if you do, then you have to do that. But that's the TEALS suggested grade breakdown, 40, 40, 20, and that makes homework a little less important and like projects really important, which is helpful. But sometimes schools mandate something. In that case, you have to do that. So that's generally homework. The other piece of their homework, of course, will be working on the projects. So there will be times when you might want to assign less other homework because like it's close to a checkpoint or something. We looked at a sample quiz. So this is not a rule. It's just like a possible recommendation. Is like you could quiz per chapter. Alternatively, some people quiz per week. And so I don't know. I mean, that's something you could do is have Monday be like go over homework and then take a quiz. I don't know if that's what you want to do. But like some sort of regular quizzing so you can keep track of where kids are stuck before the test. So it's not like the last day of the unit when you realize that like no one understands something. And so we looked at one of the quizzes when we did peer grading, but essentially like that length is probably what you want. Like a couple of more like recall type questions, not necessarily definitions, and then a code example that they have to write out. And I think there are a bunch of quizzes in the repository that you could just lift from.
A lot of extra credit that's completely unrelated.
I'm not a
to the
fan of that.
subject.
I should have said that before. I think that's terrible.
I have no idea who those last two people were on the women's national.
Right,
really?
and
Is
it's
that
just
soccer or is that baseball?
I don't know either.
What's the point of that?
It's the worst. I don't know. I didn't write these quizzes.
That doesn't help with anything you're learning.
I agree, and it like alienates people and incentivizes the wrong thing.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
it's
if it's
awful.
extra credit, it should be a question that they're gonna need later.
I'm with you. Yep, totally agree. But yeah, aside from that, that's like one way that you might approach a quiz. Alternatively, you are going to want to test per unit. This is kind of like a different idea. So a lot of these use actual AP questions. I don't think that's a bad idea. And I think another good thing to do here is maybe like time it similar to the AP exam. So we'll look at it, but AP is like a little less than 2 minutes per multiple choice question, and then like 25 minutes per free response approximately. So you can kind of like assign a similar time breakdown, and then when it comes to the exam, they won't be like super rushed.
This missing the answer 1, answer 2, answer 3, none of the above, all of the above type questions.
Yeah, which are
we're seeing on those tests.
yeah. Well, we'll actually look at like the types of multiple choice questions. That is definitely one of them. The 1, 2, and 3, 1 and 2 only.
Yeah, yeah.
That's big. Yeah. So including questions like that consistently will definitely help. Especially, I mean,
So it won't throw them off when they get to the actual
exactly.
test.
Especially like, the other thing that this is important, because I didn't do this when I taught AP. When I taught AP, I like had everything timed great, but my kids came back and they were like, we all ran out of time because we didn't factor in how long it takes to bubble in the answers. Because
Really?
I had never given them a bubble thing, so they were just circling them, and then they were like, we ran out of time at the end because we realized that we had to bubble them all in.
Yeah.
So something to be aware of if
You
you
get
can't.
Scantron
By
forms
now.
nowadays.
They should know.
Well, I guess they had just like, I mean, they knew they had to, but they
practice, right?
didn't budget the time in to do it because I had never.
Maybe
like,
they're
done it.
super just inefficient at making sure the entire bubble was
Yeah,
covered.
I don't know. I was horrible when they came back and told me that. I was like, oh my god. Like,
Yeah.
one kid was like, I left 10 questions blank or something, and I was like, oh no, like, what did I do? So just like all those testing, this is like a good place to factor in all the test taking things so that nothing is a surprise. And there are samples of these as well that you could just steal. So, this is important to talk about. Well, particularly important, I think, if you have kids that have never had taken AP before. It's like an approach to grading. Like, I feel like some people see grading as very rigid, and like, if you don't meet this deadline, you get a 0. Like, you can fall into this hole. But I guess grades are more of like this motivational tool.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you should feel free to make like adjustments or like incentivize things differently. Like, let's say like a kid is like doing really like doesn't take notes ever, and then you're like, well, hey, if you like take notes this week and do all your homework, then I'll let you use your notes on the next quiz.
Mm-hmm.
Or like let's say you did bad on all the quizzes in this unit, but you did really good on the unit test, then like I'll replace your unit test grade for all those previous quizzes because it's the same material. So there are like various things to just like, because kids are gonna get behind and they'll be like, I can never catch up.
Mm-hmm.
If I do the math, like I'm gonna fail no matter what, so let me just stop trying. But
Right.
you could say like, well, okay, here are some things you can do to like come back. Or, if you miss like 3 checkpoints on a project, you have lost enough credit to like not get a good grade, but maybe, if you catch up and do these things, you will help your grade. So just like in AP, it tends to become a really big thing, especially around the second project when kids just like start to feel like their grade is terrible. So
Yeah. You did think you definitely have to stress when it comes to this that students should not be procrastinating when it comes to their assignments. Then
yeah.
the checkpoints will help, but you'll still set up checkpoints and they'll still wait until the very last minute to get the checkpoint done. So
Right.
It's the way we operate.
yeah.
It's just,
It is.
Well, I mean, even
have
we
a
do it
checkpoint,
now.
you're
I mean,
gonna
I do
wait.
it now.
Yeah.
Another thing some teams do is just make turning in the checkpoint on time worth a lot of points.
Mhm.
Like, even if it's not correct.
Yeah.
But it's like, just by turning it on time, you get like 10 points. And so, which is, I mean, and it has to do certain things, but like, at least they feel like, or they wait like the earlier checkpoints higher, or like things like that.
Right.
So like, I don't know, just to say that like grades are this like nebulous, flexible tool that you can use, and it's not like super rigid. Cool. Okay. So the last part is the AP
Third
exam.
one is interesting. Sorry,
ahead.
allowing students to use the computer.
Oh,
systems on
yeah.
the last 5 minutes. Have you tried that?
I've seen it in classes, and
Does something like that work?
essentially what they do, it's like telling kids like you wrote this thing by hand, but you have like 5 minutes to type it in and see if it compiles,
Mhm.
or like detect errors.
Mhm.
Which it's like short enough amount of time that like, and you can say things like it's not to go on the web and stuff,
Mhm.
but like strictly to open up like a text editor and like check your code. I think that I've seen that work decently well.
Okay.
And it's a short enough amount of time that like you're not gonna really figure anything else out that soon, but like
Right.
it's an incentive to just like catch some errors. So yeah, that's definitely something you can use. Maybe not all the time, but I forgot that was up there.
Late assignment policy or soft.
You should definitely have one.
How is the submission for things that are a little bit bigger work or best work, I guess? Because I mean, you could have them if it's just paper stuff, that's just a matter of just turning in papers. But like when it comes to larger projects, where they actually have, code, do they submit it online? Will they, copy it to a flash drive and give it to you? How is that usually?
I think a lot of teams in the past have done some kind of online submissions, like drop it in a Dropbox,
Okay.
upload it somewhere, send it somewhere. The only tricky thing with that is that, like, if you set a deadline that's outside of class time, the turn-in rate is low. Like, if you say, like, it's due by midnight, like, a lot of kids just, like, will forget and then come to class and have not done it. So sometimes what they do is they say, like, the first 5 minutes of class on the day that it's due, like, that's when you upload it. So just so that everyone, like...
using OneDrive.
OneDrive?
She has everybody make a Microsoft account. And then, like, the first week of class, everybody makes a Microsoft account.
Okay.
And then she had everybody, like, put stuff in the cloud. She's like, no paper, we're not doing that. So send it to me.
So,
That's
yeah,
good.
there you go. And
It
then,
used to go paperless, but, I mean, that's great, but the test is on paper.
right,
Yeah.
you
So,
definitely
I
will
mean,
have to do some paper-related
Yeah.
things. But for, like, project submissions, that's, like, one way to do it. And then you can also, like, return feedback that way, which is kind of cool.
Discreetly. Well, I guess we do that online too, but...
But, yeah, so, I mean, you should definitely have a system, but if that's what they're used to, that might be the way to go.
I guess I'll have to sign up for a Microsoft account.
And I didn't tell you to do that, so.
She'll tell you.
It's not
You can say.
It's not the TEALS
She will tell you.
line. Oh man, that's funny. Cool. Okay. We're doing great on time. Let's look at the exam. And so there's just like a bunch of specifics about the exam, and then we'll look at like sample questions, and we'll do one free response question so you can see like the scoring. So the date is already set, which is fun. So you know exactly when it'll be. May 7th, 8 a.m. At the same time as Spanish language. So if kids are taking that, one of them will be on an alternate day.
Oh, Spanish language test. Oh, okay. Sorry,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it was proctored in Spanish or not.
The questions are written.
Yeah.
Now that it's
wait
a
minute.
foreign language.
That's challenging. That's challenging.
You
So,
must learn Spanish.
If they are taking AP Spanish and they have to take it at the same time, or take that, is there priority between the two? Like they'll reschedule one?
I think it depends on the rest of their schedule. It's sort of, I mean, it's not in your hands. Like they'll be told when they're supposed to take it.
The student
otherwise,
will.
yeah,
Okay.
by like, this is like done by College Board.
Okay.
But I think it's like there's a series of alternate times, and then whenever they don't have another exam, they'll like.
Do they actually go? Because when I took AP tests, it was proctored at the school, like sort of at the school. But are they going to like testing centers now to do this kind of thing, or is it
I
still
think
at the
it
school?
depends on the school. Do you know?
I have no idea what Dorsey's doing.
Yeah.
Because
Because
it's their first AP ever for computer, for like, I don't know what
So,
they
I have other APs.
right. If a
Yeah.
school offers a lot of AP exams, they'll usually do it at their school.
Okay.
But if they don't, they usually send them off-site because everyone else is still being loud and like doing stuff.
Okay. But this should be established well in advance.
Yeah, this
so
is
that-
like totally out of your control. Like,
Okay.
there's all this paperwork that school has to submit in order to get kids signed up.
Okay.
And then it's all like, I would ask the
Do you
question.
have to pay for the tests,
They-
or does the school pay
They
for it?
technically have to pay for it, but they can get fee waivers and
Okay.
stuff. Yeah, on behalf of kids.
That would be a terrible thing to like, get to the point where they're all ready to take the test, but they can't afford it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's similar to like the SAT and everything else.
Somewhere subsidized somehow. Okay.
Yeah, because I think they don't want that to be a barrier. But all of that is like school should be taking care of it. Well in advance too. I think it all has to be set by like March.
Okay, good.
The format is like most of them, half multiple choice, half free response. The terrible thing I think here is that they have taken a bunch of multiple choice and then they have a really huge marathon free response section to do after.
That's really long. Almost 2 hours.
Yeah, and so by then it's like definite fatigue.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how like you might have them practice just like spending a lot of time coding or like
break?
yeah, and then 105-minute free response. And
Maybe
there's 4 questions.
You want to save up 1 or 2 sessions, in-class sessions, to actually have them try to do something for 105 minutes.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah, and then after they did something for 75 minutes, it's like
Yeah.
the endurance there is just like
I
really
had 2 AP
demanding.
tests on one day.
Yeah. No, I remember.
I was gonna say that's one of
And
the
like
worst
taking the
high school memories.
the GRE was similar to that too, because it's like 4 hours long.
So that's what they're up against. It's all pen and paper. You guys would have gotten, I think, like a practice exam in the mail. So if you look in there, it has all of the instructions that are read to them, and then also like they get some reference documents, which I think for the most part I would suggest they just not look at because they'll waste time doing it. But if you want to like see all the things that'll be handed to them, or like simulate it somehow, or like read the instructions to them before they take the test, so they know what to expect.
So how to open a sealed exam.
Right, like all that, break the seal. I don't know when the day will come that it's all online, but
You'd think it would be soon.
yeah.
The book we're using is not this BJP.
No, I brought it with me. You guys have seen it?
Yeah, they mailed it to me.
But there is online. There's a version of this that has like another column that's just like there's book chapters in there.
Okay.
It's just not the one that I printed. I think it got cut off anyway.
Cool.
So yeah, it's just an additional column that says like corresponding chapters. Everything else should be the same. So that is the exam. This is the one thing that's different. So this is annoying about looking at previous exams, is that the one thing that's different is that there won't be the grid world questions, and you don't know what those new questions will look like. So there's a little bit of uncertainty, but everything else should be generally the same. This is the scoring.
You said they're expanding the free response to
So-
cover that extra time, or they just cut it off.
Right. So it was always 4 questions, but the 4th question used to be strictly on grid world.
Oh, okay.
Now that 4th question will be on something else.
Okay.
And there were also a few multiple choice, like 3 or 4 multiple choice strictly on grid world that will now be on something else. And so it's scored from 1 to 5. I think you guys probably know this. Everything is additive for the most part. So on multiple choice, you do not lose points for getting things wrong. It's just added correct, so they should be guessing. And on free response, for the most part, you don't lose points, but sometimes you can. That's like a rough raw to AP score conversion, but it's like there's high variance from year to year. So like this one that just happened, I think like a third of kids got a 1 or something, and then a bunch of kids got a 4 and a 5, and like the 3-4 score, the 2-3 score range was really low, like more so than usual. So there's like weird, it changes from year to year. It's harder to predict. But
So is that saying that if they get 62% or higher, it's
it's like
5,
62 is a raw score. So what they do is they have the multiple choice and you add up how many you get.
Right.
So the highest is
Out of
75. That's a number.
Right.
And then free response, each one is worth 9 points.
Oh,
And then so you add that up.
Okay.
And then that raw number converts to
To an actual 5 or 3.
yeah. And the cutoffs are like roughly that, but they change.
Scaled per year, pretty much.
Yeah.
Curved.
And I wonder, it'll be interesting to see what they do this year, like if it's different because it's new. But so it's hard. It's typically very like bipolar, like a bunch of 1s and a bunch of 4s and 5s. And so multiple choice is all 5 answer choice. For the most part, get progressively harder, but that's not a rule. So they should probably budget more time for the later half, and they should definitely guess.
So, okay.
And then these are the question types. So there's actually 2 sides of question types. So and I'll just show a couple examples of them too. But there's like basic concepts. There's what does this code do? There's a lot of like, here are a bunch of possible options. Which of these is the correct one?
Okay.
There's stuff that's like, why won't this compile, or like which one won't, or why won't this work? Should this be this or this? That's more like reasoning. And then there's these types, which are like a really big set of code, and then like multiple questions on it, so kind of like reading comprehension. And then the 1, 2, 3s, where it's like, which of these are true? 1 and 2, 1 and 3. And so those take a ton of time. So maybe your piece of advice is like do them last. If you run out, that's. But here's some examples. So this is like a typical evaluation question. That's just like, what does this do? It's on array lists. Array lists are an AP favorite. So that's something that you should definitely cover. Arrays are an AP favorite, and array lists also. So they just like love array manipulation of all kinds. So that's like what this would look like. This is one where they have a piece of this in that if statement. It says if expression, and they're asking you to figure out what needs to go in that slot for it to do what it's supposed to do. And so this is a little bit syntactical also. So yeah, they should, I guess, be used to like working with code that already exists.
Wait, that would be the right answer there.
It's new.
Array list of strings.
They're replacing all occurrences of name with new value. Isn't that correct?
If it's a string and you're doing equality, it's equality
Oh,
on
it should
objects,
be-
right? It should be A.
It should be A.
Yeah. So that's a string comparison, right? If it returns 0.
Yeah, now I'm looking at it and I'm like, Yeah, I'm inclined to say that too.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah,
see
you
if it's
can't
the
do a
same
comparison of
object.
strings with equals.
If the same, unless it's the same string object.
Yeah.
Same pointer.
Right, yeah, agreed. Gosh. This is why I shouldn't rely on anyone. We like clearly collaborate on these slides. Great. So, yeah, good to know.
That's okay. The AP test gets it wrong too.
Yeah,
plenty of
that's
times.
funny. I was gonna say
Plenty of
that's like the
times.
kind of thing that like a student would do. So it's like cool pitfalls, like comparison of strings. So this is how these are. They tell you some information, and then they're like a student. Here's a condition. They can pass a programming course if these things are true.
Mhm.
And then there's a bunch of examples of how to implement that, and they're asking which of these are correct. And in this scenario, all of them are. And so I don't know. Part of me thinks that that's more often than not the right answer, but I don't know if that's like a rule or if that's just my own anecdotal experience.
Should we tease it? When in doubt.
I mean,
Pick all of them.
Maybe. I feel like that's happened to me more frequently, but I haven't done the like statistical analysis. But anyway, this is like reasonably common.
That's like going back through like all the multiple choice questions and saying, oh well, it's A most of the time. Or looking at your grid and say, I answered A a lot of times. It must be B.
Right.
Yeah.
Like statistically invalid. But yeah, so these are definitely tricky. This is interesting. So there is some notion of like design choices on the exam. And so this is kind of the kind of thing you might see. This one is actually like intuitive in a sense of just like knowing about cars, but they might not all be like that. So that's one, and then this is the example of like syntax and actually knowing like what will and will not compile and why.
Yeah, that's good.
Checking them all now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's generally the multiple choice. If you go through and take one of these, you'll get a pretty good idea of like they're all pretty similar. They follow. I mean, I don't think they spend too much time rewriting questions. So if you've taken one or two, you'll know like what the distribution typically is.
Yeah. I think you want to stress to the students to not immediately jump for the first answer that pops out. That they should at least kind of go through some of the
Yes, I think that's
rest of that.
definitely. And also, the other thing that I think is important about these is like what they should be writing on the test.
Mhm.
So like as you do these, you're probably like writing stuff out, and so if they can practice like what they should be keeping track of, should they be underlining things, should they be like that's another skill they probably will not have.
It's general test taking.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a little different than like an English test in terms of like what they're like, oh, I'm underlining keywords, but actually like here it's a little different. So just like showing them what they need to be paying attention to. Yeah. And so the other half, of course, is free response. And there's 4 of them. they each have varying amounts of parts. A lot of times it's like a big class essentially, and then they'll highlight parts of it that they'll want you to manipulate or like write a couple methods or do something related to that. So a big piece of it is just like figuring out what some piece of code does when it's given to you. They have to write in Java, but there are like sort of exceptions. Like some aspects of that are more important than others. Like if you make certain syntactical errors, they don't really care. Like if you miss a semicolon or something. Although if you consistently do that, I think they care more. Like if you have 0 semicolons, then they're like, that's not good.
Okay.
But more of the focus is on conditions. So like they will tell you certain things about what's going on, and if you violate those conditions, you're like done. Like if they tell you a variable is called something or is a certain type, and you like change the type,
Right.
call it something else, that's like definite loss of points.
Is the fundamental follow instructions.
Right. If you like return the wrong type of thing and they've already specified what the return type is, that's like 0 points. So it's more about like following the rules and being consistent than it is like knowing the tricks of the language. The scoring, the way it works is they get a bunch of teachers in a room and they have like a checklist and they just like pass these down and score them really quick.
Right.
And so the emphasis would be on just like writing neat code. Like you're not graded on style, but if it's hard to figure out what you're doing, chances are they're just going to be like, I don't know, and pass it along. But the scoring guidelines are really clear, and we'll look at one of them. And yeah, for the most part, you gain points. It's hard to lose points, but you can if you either have a major syntax error or violate a condition. Or if you're inconsistent in your own code and you're like calling things different things, or like you wrote a method in one part and then you're calling it the wrong way or contradicting it, that's like you lose points there too.
Now, if what happens if they are using tools that are outside of the subset?
I think that's okay.
Okay.
You're just not required to. They won't ever ask you something that requires something out of the subset.
Okay.
But if they use something really obscure, they could lose the points if the reader is like, I don't know what that is.
If the reader has to pull out the API to figure out what it is,
Right.
it's probably bad. Okay.
But I doubt that for the most part these questions are straightforward enough.
Okay.
And let's see. Question specific, often get credit for. Oh, yeah, the last bit of this is probably more important, is that sometimes if you don't know anything about the question, you can still score some points for doing like some trivial things. Like if you're just like, I know I have to return an integer, so you declare one and return it, you could get a point for the return statement. Like if you know you need to initialize an array, but you don't know what to put inside of it, like the initialize statement will get you points. Declaring certain variables, like there are little things that you can do to earn points even if you don't know what's going on. And so that's like a good test taking strategy for kids, I guess. And then these, oh yeah.
So should we do that during our tests and when they take the final?
I have a mixed opinion on it. I have a mixed opinion on it because I think one of the reasons why they do that on the AP test is because they have such a limited amount of time to score them, and you can't really get the idea of what the student, where they were hung up on the problem. Like if they just, put a return statement, but clearly didn't put any effort into like any of the other parts of the problem. Like they are going down their checklist of things to add, and they +1 it. But for us, if it's very obvious that they're trying to game the point gaining system here, I don't know. I'm a little torn about it.
If we don't do it, do we at least tell them that when they're crunched for time while they take this to do that, so they know ahead of time?
I don't know.
No?
I don't know, because you want them to solve the problem, not try to gain the most sub-points not doing the problem. It's like saying, I'm going to give you 5 points for writing your name at the top of the test, kind of thing. Great, you wrote your name, but did you actually do any of the material? Great, you returned 0. Wow, good job. I don't know. That's
what you might do is, when you get close to test prep and you know there's some kids that are not going to score well,
yeah.
You might just give them those suggestions, like close to the test, because then, in that case, if they score a good score and they don't know a whole lot, it could go a long way for their like
That's true.
success in a different way.
That is true. You do want them to maximize the test score, so they get the most out of that.
But I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't know that you want to emphasize this like from the beginning on all your tests.
Yeah.
Like if you have the right return type, you get a
As long
point.
as you declare that in, I'll give you 2 points.
But the other thing is, if they see enough of these, they might pick up on that anyway,
Mhm.
which is, I mean, I guess up to them. But because it becomes kind of clear. But yeah, that's a good point. I see what you're saying.
What's the expectations that people are having for this class?
They're all gonna get 5s.
Oh, yeah,
30
right.
of them.
Or else
35s
or else you're
maybe.
fired.
Or else, hey, I'm volunteering.
I've actually
you know,
had
whatever.
I actually had a volunteer ask me, like, what do I have to do to get fired? And I was like, I don't. Nobody has that. No, they said, who has the authority to fire me?
Uh-huh.
And I was like, nobody has that authority. Like, you're
I don't
volunteering
know.
your
These
time.
days, what can't you do to not get fired from the school, right? You can look at them the wrong way, you can get fired.
No, I think the expectation is just that like that they have the opportunity. I mean, honestly, it's the first time that this class has been offered. I don't think they're expecting everybody to get 5s. There are probably some students that will, or not necessarily 5s. I don't even want to say that, but there's probably some students that'll do well.
There will be students that do. Will be.
Yes.
Not probably, there will be students.
And that's probably an expectation that like whatever you're putting in front of them is preparing, you know, in theory, preparing them for the exam if they are like doing what they're supposed to.
Yeah.
But
I think for the, sorry,
no, go ahead.
for this class particularly at Dorsey, from the discussion I had with Daphne, they want to chain them the courses into stuff. So they wanted to do the intro, and then they went to the AP class, and they wanted to do a robotics class afterwards.
Yeah,
So-
that's why she was telling him she wants him to build something.
Oh,
Is that why it's just the,
The robotics, they have a robotics class, and they've never like made it anywhere. And so she got some kids into the White House Science Fair this year, so now she wants to participate. That's why she wants you to be like, to teach them to build something.
So by the end of their AP class, they should be versed enough in Java to be able to, I assume, program the
So that, yeah, so
bootstrapped
something can move,
Lego bot and get some
Whatever
designs,
they-
right? Yeah. So-
decide to make.
or put together games or something like that. So,
Mhm.
But test-wise, I think want as many of the kids to pass them as possible. This is the only AP Computer Science test now, right? This is their like one shot at getting that college credit. So
Cool, exciting.
Very.
no
Um,
pressure. No pressure.
But if you talk it up, the kids will be like nervous too, so that's always good.
Yeah.
They'll feel the pressure.
Maybe just tell them that like your typical CS class in college is 3 units. You know, a unit at a university costs now about $2,000. You know, you do well in this test, it's like getting $10,000. You know. Yeah.
I'm sure they'll be bought in. If you, I don't know, it wasn't too hard. I didn't think to invest kids in AP. Like if you talk it up enough, they're like, okay, I can tell this is important and cool and like.
I think that, well, I guess we'll talk about it more when it comes to engagement. It's going to kind of be the tough part for AP specifically because there's so much focus on the academic portion of it that relating it to like the more fun stuff, like I'm going to make an app out of this kind of thing, is a little harder to fit in there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so part of that might, either in like your demos or in your like day-to-day activities, like trying to infuse, even though Java is like the least interesting, like some aspect of interesting.
Even in college, there's very little engagement.
Yeah.
Why the hell am I doing this?
Yeah.
Java is like just not an interesting language. But even just like showing them not Java, but like in computer science, like what you guys do, or something cool that you built. Something like,
Well, I know some of them will be engaged because of the whole intro thing.
Yeah,
All they did
hopefully.
was learn how to
Yeah.
make apps and games.
Mhm.
So they know that this is like a step to improving the little easy stuff that they
Yeah.
learned previously.
Well,
But not everybody in this class has been through intro. That's your statement.
Some enough of them, I guess, to talk it up and help us who came for the
Yeah.
summer too, because we had some of the AP kids come hang out while some of the intro did summer. So they know, and they'll be able to like, I guess, talk to the new ones.
What did they focus on in the intro? Is it Java, JavaScript?
The first week, it was only 3 weeks, and the first week they learned basic UDK.
Okay.
So they learned how to make a room, which it took the week, learning how to get those 4 walls and everything going, and then
Is
learning
Unity,
how to
right?
put the
UDK?
yeah.
Okay.
and then put the bot in there so that it looks like a video game where they were shooting at a player who spawned into the room. You learned how to create textures and stuff like that. Not a lot of coding except for the little ad bots line. Most of that was just learning. And then for the rest of it, they did Construct 2, which is like HTML5 based, and it's just like they learned how to make a shooter game, and they learned how to make a platform game where their character jumped around, and they wrote out all the code for that, and they had to go find their own sprites and find their own like music and things like that for them to do. So then they did a little touch develop because she loves having them try touch develop.
I've never heard
She's
of
better
it.
Microsoft evangelist.
Yeah, she's like pushing Microsoft like the Bible.
Yeah.
They do everything. They did touch develop. Now she's not so sure about touch develop. Have you used it?
Yeah, we actually
And
have one
it's
intro
just
class
like-
that uses it. I don't like
It
it at all.
tells you exactly what to do.
Yeah.
You don't even
What is
hardly have to
It's
type
like
it
a
in.
it's like a block-based programming platform,
Like
but
the
it's
snap thing.
except that the blocks like have text on them,
Okay.
but they don't like fit together. They're not colorful. Like you just click them and then it adds text up there, like on your stage.
Okay.
And it's called Touch Develop because it operates on mobile devices and it's touch.
Like
So you
tablets.
touch blocks, yeah,
Okay.
and then they create text,
Okay.
and then you can run it, and it's like within a game environment, but
They
it's
put so much money into that though, and those tutorials, you don't have to do
Right,
anything.
it
It
has-
does everything.
it has
for
these
you. Those
tutorials
kids
that
are
pop
not
up, and they're like, click this, click this, click this, click this,
It
click
just
this,
it
and
has
then you build a
arrows,
game.
and it says click this, click this.
Wow.
And there's like
Type
no
here.
thought.
No thought involved.
Like
You start
just
to type the word, and it just puts it in for
Not
you.
even any kind of like basic scripting or anything.
You're
I mean,
sitting
it's
there
like
clicking.
you could if you wanted to just like take it and play with it, you could
Yeah.
maybe learn something. But like the tutorials that they've built are just like it's too easy. Like you do the whole thing and then you're like, what just happened? And like there's like a
Oh.
game is happening. It's like Flappy
Programming is
Bird.
easy. I'm
Yeah,
ready to
it's
go.
like that. Programming
Yeah,
is
and then you have
easy.
like Flappy Bird running, and
And
you're
then
like,
you
I
take
can make
them to
millions of
something
dollars.
else.
And you can publish directly to the Windows Store, so it's just like I don't know. It's very like
It's
weird.
exactly like that. That feeling that programming is easy, and then you
Maybe
take
that's
them
good
to
as a
something
hook,
else.
though. You know, initially
But
to
then
get their
when you
attention.
take them to something else, they
They
look
get
at us like you
disappointed.
lied to us.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's like I feel
I was,
like
I was misled.
like I feel like Snap is like programming is easy, but there's like occasionally you get stuck.
Yeah.
But
You
this
don't
is
get
like,
stuck with that one.
Oh,
You
wow.
could, and then you can try. You know, you're like, oh, I wonder if I put 200 in instead of 100, and then it pops up and it's like, no, put in 100.
Whoa.
Put in
Stay within the lines. Stay within the
That's
lines.
funny. I didn't know that.
Too crazy
Yeah,
over here.
we had this dude in the class who was just like, oh, do you think I could like play around with it and switch everything up? And we're like, yeah, sure, go for it, because we didn't know it was gonna. And he goes in and he changes all the numbers, and then he goes to run it, and they're like red flags everywhere. That's supposed to be 100. That's supposed to be 50. That's supposed to be 25. Please change them before
Oh,
you go
So
on.
just watch a video at that point. Yeah. it's
Yeah.
Nothing
So
better.
for all intents and purposes, this is going to be the first exposure to procedural
Heavy
programming.
coding.
Heavy. Wow. That doesn't involve anything bouncing around or like
No,
flashing.
yeah, heavy
Yeah,
coding.
ASCII art.
This is the
That's all
heavy
you got.
coding.
I did some of those practice test questions, and they're like, make this rocket. It's like this little, slashes and stuff.
Yeah.
And like, okay.
It's exciting.
Yay!
It's not as good
Oh,
as
that's
it
it.
gets.
You do that. At least I did that for all of my beginning, like learning C class and learning C++ class. You get stars. You gotta make little pictures
Right.
and stuff. Make little bar graphs. Okay, but it's not exciting. It's not unreal.
Yeah, not the same. So that's you'll have to think about that.
I have to temper some expectations here.
Okay, so we'll look at a question. One thing that's important here is that if you go to the website, the URL is weird, but if you just type like APCS free response questions
Mhm.
or like AP Central, APCS, whatever it is, you'll get to this page that has all of the past free response questions ever. So they're really like shady about releasing multiple choice, but they like 2 days after the exam they release all the free response
Really?
questions.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So you can see all of them. Kids can see all of them too, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Like you can, I mean, what I mean is like if you use it on a test and you're like they might have seen the answer, like good for them for
Are the
digging
answers
through.
there too? Or
Yeah, so
samples?
it's like I can actually pull up the actual website. APCS. I don't know. There we go. Yeah, it's some ridiculous website, but it's like
Oh, it's right on the College Board's
questions, scoring guidelines,
Yeah.
sample responses, score like
website. Wow.
all of this for back until I think 2003.
That's the beginning when they started to use Java, right?
So it's really great. I mean, it's a great bank of questions. I think even if they do look them up, it's still like, haha, I got you to look up questions and
Yeah.
find all the answers. Like, it's great. They should be doing that. So
Yeah.
it's a really good resource. That's probably one of the best things about AP.
When I took this, it was in Pascal.
Yeah, and me too. Yeah. Oh, and it was last year that you used Pascal, I think.
And so, you already have this, I think. But so I think, we have 10 minutes left. So you probably already grabbed an AP free response question. That was like the one thing that I think is over there. And so this is just one of the ones from 2012. There's a wide range, but this is reasonably representative of a question. So take a look at it first, and then I'll give you the answer key, and you can see like what they're actually looking for. And they have approximately 25 minutes to do this.
Yeah, let's do it.
Not
Or
the
just
entire
like that.
thing, but I would
Okay.
think about how you would do it.
Okay.
It seems pretty easy.
And like what sorts of things they would need to pick up on, and like what they might miss.
They use equal.
Well, that's
That's a totally valid thing to bring up with
Right.
because I
That's
mean
the
you
major
teach them
thing. Yeah.
that double equals means test for equality, and then they come to objects and they're like, nope, it doesn't mean that anymore. Wow.
so. If you look through it, these are the answers. If you want to see what they're actually looking for.
I feel like these are somehow got to be trick questions because I don't remember these questions being so easy.
I think for the most part they're reasonably straightforward.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of like little things you really got to get.
Yeah.
The other thing worth noting is that it's possible to earn more than 9 points, but they're out of 9. So there are a lot of different things kids can do right.
Really? Where do they?
So like if these just add to more than. Oh, do they not?
I only see
Oh,
9
that's
plus.
weird.
Yeah, and then 3 minus.
Sometimes they do. Okay,
Okay.
this is not a good example. Sometimes they add to more than 9.
Can you do? they're instantiating things of this, and it's just the interface. It doesn't have a constructor. Can you do that?
Instantiating.
Like forces, right? Force. There's no actual constructor for this force.
Yeah, that's legit. Because as long as all the objects in the array implement the interface, you can address it as an array of the interfaces. And not specifically as a... Because that's what the interface
What if I want to
is.
make like a new force?
Then you're making the new object of whatever is implementing force.
Which I don't have access to, right?
Who is it? I don't know. I think that's out of the scope of the question. How they're initializing this array here. Yeah, because the array could be polymorphic. It just needs to. All of the objects just need to implement that interface.
Yeah, on the back of the answer key, there are like sample code examples of answers,
Mm-hmm.
which are not. I mean, it's a subset of possible answers, but
Yeah. You guys use Java a lot?
Not lately, but it's okay. We'll do it. Now, most of the programming that I do at work it ends up being C or C++ or random off stuff for like whenever I have to troubleshoot someone's web app or Tomcat application, so I have to use Java occasionally. But like, yeah, not lately. But that's okay. It's still relatively easy. It's pretty easy to stay ahead of where the students are.
yeah, this is, and you got to be like 1 week ahead.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think the trickiest things here are like checking for null references. I'm sure
Yeah.
that's something that they like wouldn't necessarily do. Name equality must use string equality check.
Mm-hmm. Name dot equals
Right
to
there.
C. Yeah, yeah.
Returns correct index -1 point if not. That's harsh.
Harsh?
Yeah, like a lot of to actually lose points for doing something
Yeah.
wrong is
Oh,
as opposed to like 0.
yeah.
So like they need to get the right index.
I guess that is technically
Where
what
does
they're
it
supposed to be doing.
Oh.
It
On
makes
part
sense.
A.
Oh, I see.
And like for example, question-specific penalties -2 for consistently using the incorrect array name instead of spaces. So like, if you just like ignore things that are given to you,
Mhm.
harsh.
Whole instructions.
Where does it say that one?
Right here at the
At the
bottom.
very bottom.
Oh.
So yeah, you can. I mean, there's tons of these that you can look through, but a lot of times they're like this, where they ask you to implement a certain part. That is all the planned programming that I have for today. So you guys want to talk about anything specific? And then we meet again in a week, which is it's out there, so I don't know if you guys will make the drive out or not, but I will attempt to have a solid hangout broadcast. But that one will be a lot of. I mean, it would be good if you made it mainly because it's a lot of like practice teaching. But otherwise, you can see the exercises and like do them at a different time.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was kind of hard. I missed the first meeting I was watching. There's just like a lot of like exercise time and like dead time. And it's like 3 hour like video.
Yeah.
Cut into the parts where actually things are going on.
Yeah,
kind of, yeah.
Less than ideal for sure.
Yeah.
It's all the documents and the slides and stuff, but it's definitely just not designed.
How do you get all the documents in the slides?
So if you, I think the slides should be posted, but if you go to through those weeks of lessons, inside each of one of them, there's like a video and then all the documents that are associated with the lesson and the slides.
Oh.
So
Like that online, the week 2 one was very good.
yeah,
It's meant for
the ones that are
online,
designed for online
Yeah.
are like concise.
Yeah.
The ones that are meant to be in person, at some point we'll probably go back and like
Yeah. That would
make
be
them
fun.
concise, but it's hard to do it like in the moment.
Yeah, yeah. Are we good?
I think so. Yeah, we're right on time.
All right.
Nice.
Cool. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you guys.
Yeah.
It's nice for you too.
Good to,
We still need one more.
so yeah, so we have one more team member.
Yeah.
Met him.
He was at the first session.
The person.
He works for DreamWorks. He works in where is that? Glendale.
Oh,
I think
okay.
he lives out in Santa Clarita area.
Oh,
Yeah, he
okay.
lives far.
Yeah.
He really wanted to do this.
Yeah, he wanted specifically to be here instead of his kids go to Valencia high school over there, but he like wanted to work with a higher needs population.
That's
Mm.
cool.
So he was like, "Yeah, I'll make the drive."
Yeah, that's fun.
And I don't even know if it's a drive or if he's like taking a bunch of trains, but regardless, he was like, "Yeah,
From Glendale? It's from Glendale. There's trains that come on.
yeah." I vaguely remember him saying that he commutes by train.
Yeah.
And so that's what he was just like, "I'll just take a different train and then go back to work."
Yeah. Unfortunately, this is pretty much on the way to work for me, so it's not really that out of the way. It's kind of cool. But
Yeah, that worked out actually. We weren't sure like finding volunteers. It's never clear like you're like, are you gonna find people in this place?
yeah.
And so yeah, it was. I'm
Well, I
glad
went
we
to
did.
the school yesterday to pick up the volunteer application. It's actually the first time I've taken the expo line before, so it's kind of neat. It's been sitting there for 3 years now. It's completely ignored it. Go anywhere on it. It's not. So the plan for the expo line goes from sort of downtown-ish to like through USC and it kind of goes a little bit east, but they're supposed to connect it all the way to Santa Monica.
Have they
Oh,
started
cool.
that?
They have started it. It's
It's
not going to
not
happen.
finished though,
no,
huh,
it's
right?
going to be like maybe
How
a
far
year or
does that
two,
thing
like-
take you?